I'd been in the field of sexual medicine for some time. I built a company with one of the male drugs, and I really was watching people sort of walk away from innovation here.
The FDA finally giving the green light to the first prescription medication for women's libido.
The Food and Drug Administration has approved the so-called little pink pill.
The FDA is finally giving the go-ahead to the first prescription medication for women's sexual dysfunction.
There are 25 drugs approved for some form of male sexual dysfunction, but still a great big zero for the most common form of female sexual dysfunction. It was an exciting time to jump into the female side and address an unmet need. It's a game changer for us, to be sure, and I think a game changer, quite frankly, in female sexual health. Hopefully what happens now is you've broken through, research, money comes into that space, and women ultimately have a variety of treatment options as well.
CEO of Sprout Pharmaceuticals, which has just been acquired, announced yesterday by Valeant for $1 billion.
Valeant bought the company for $1 billion.
It has been a delight to now have others come to me with their ideas and help them navigate the process of getting it to the next level. We're some cross between an incubator and a VC. Our team rolls up their sleeves and works alongside companies that are breaking through for women. Now I need to...
Come on, ladies and gentlemen, the pink pill is here!
Thank you. Hi, that's me. A little awkward to stand while that's playing, but hey, everybody, thank you so much for having me. Hello, Bahamas. That is me on the left. I bet you didn't know this. I grew up on an island as well. I grew up in the Fiji Islands, and coming here has been such a great reminder of just the warmth of an island culture. Thank you for how warmly you've welcomed me, of the beauty that is all around me, and also a reminder that there's good reason for the expression, alone on an island. Because you can feel that way, isn't it true? Entrepreneurship, those of you sitting in this room know this, entrepreneurship can be incredibly lonely. And so I've had a lot of time to be thinking about and reminiscing about that childhood. How did that little girl in, mind you, I want you to note, a pink hula skirt, that's right, always the pink, in a pink hula skirt, get from that point to make all of those choices along that long, lonely road, choices to break some rules, to take some risks, and ultimately to become a moneymaker that built and sold 2 businesses, the last for $1 billion, which, by the way, I got back for free, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that later. So how did I get there? You know, when, to the kind invitation of Sebas coming here, I started thinking about my childhood, growing up on an island in which, you know, I didn't have any of the resources, or I didn't have, in fact, those connections. I started thinking about what I did there, and it really made me realize that I was taught my most important business lesson much younger in life. So if you look at those pictures now, you're taking a little stroll down memory lane with me, you're not looking at a Harvard MBA. You're not looking at the girl who had a rich uncle in her Rolodex to call up to fund my first company. You're looking more like at the pale girl on the right, who basically went to a different school of thought. A school of thought that ultimately and often defied conventional wisdom, thanks to my parents. So this is not me, but looks pretty much like what I looked like my entire youth doing homework. Does anybody recognize this? Like where you were asking your parents for some help? I don't know that I was quite as lofty as what is the meaning of existentialism. I probably was saying, like, how exactly do you diagram a sentence, right? Asking those, so you guys either did this yourself or your kids are doing this with you today, right? They're asking you these kind of questions. No matter what question I asked of my parents, they always gave me the same 4-word response. What do you think? Exasperating. Exasperating that they said it, but in hindsight, instrumental. What do you think? What were they doing as they were teaching me that? They weren't playing along to my wanting to ace my grades by getting a step up. They weren't trying to help me win the science fair. No, 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 no. They were teaching me something way more important. They were teaching me to own it. Pretty appropriate for this crowd, right? They were teaching me to own it. How were they teaching me to own it? First and foremost, they were cultivating my curiosity, my resourcefulness. Because here's what I know. Starting with resources doesn't guarantee success. Resourcefulness does. I talk to founders all the time, entrepreneurs today, who see often funding as the destination. And we can probably think television and everything else to look like that's the prize, right? As an entrepreneur, I get the big check. But here's what I'll tell you, that might be some financial resources. But if that entrepreneur isn't resourceful enough to learn every day, to ask questions, they will never meet the true destination of success. So here's a picture of me, circled in pink. I call that year BG. That's before Google. So how many of you in this room had to do homework before Google? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. So that's before Google. I saw this online the other day. Do you guys see this? I hope Google never goes down because I realized I only know 5 things. Thank God, actually, in those BG days, when we did it, that curiosity was going to force me to go and ask others. That girl in the classroom raising her hand. I had to ask others those questions. I had to listen, and what a skill that was developing. Listening to different points of view, diversity of thought, seeking different answers from other people. That foundation was so important. They were also teaching me hard work. The price of success? Hard work. It's really that simple, isn't it? And I'm glad that they did when I got into my career, because if you know a little bit about it, it's been quite an interesting roller coaster ride of tenacity. You know what no success story is? Overnight. Not one. And it really is going to be that hard work, putting that time in, that's going to make all of the difference in the world. But we don't really want that to be true, do we? We romanticize it. What's the secret, right? What's the shortcut? What's the unicorn that we're looking out for? Unicorns are a term that we use for $1 billion companies, right? Like the one that I built. I'm going to tell you the true secret. In order to become the unicorn, you better embrace the workhorse. Ooh, I missed my pretty graphic. There you go. Embrace the workhorse to become the unicorn. So the last part of that what do you think, was teaching me independence. And for this I am most grateful. Independence of thought. Chanel probably said it best. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself aloud. It's sometimes you're going to have to put on those boxing gloves. Sometimes you're going to have a point of view that isn't the mainstream point of view, but you're going to believe it so deeply to your core that you're going to have to put on those gloves and fight for it. I took this picture just about a month ago. It's a little girl who came into my office. I have boxing gloves on my desk, pink boxing gloves all the time. And without anybody prompting her, she picked them up, put them on, and did this. And I thought, this is everything that we're about at the Pink Ceiling. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, that's the words that I want about independence. That's Nyla, right? Who dazzled all of us opening up today. That spirit that we want, I think, for all of our daughters. And that independence was really also making me an entrepreneur along the way. Because I decided that if I was going to create value for others, well, I was going to have a piece of that value. So that independence really was the independence, if you will, of ownership. And all of that came so simply, right? How does that owner become, I like to think of this artwork from Ashley Longshore, Little Miss Muffet became Warren Buffett. How do you get there? Foundationally, I got there on this, 4 little words. What do you think? So let me fast forward you guys a little bit into my career. So I have been in healthcare for a really long time. I worked for the big guys. I decided I didn't fit. I didn't fit in a big environment in which I was going to be a number. No way. I had too much to say, and I wanted to be heard. So I chased smaller and chased smaller, chased innovation, chased where that was happening until I started something from my own. And I found myself having built already a company with a male sexual health drug. You know, people say, Cindy, why did you get into sex? I like to say Irish Catholic. My mother wishes I would stop saying that on stages. But I really got into it for the love of the science in that category. So here I am. I built a company in a male sexual drug. I'm in this field. I'm very knowledgeable about all of the research in that field. And I'm staring down this statistic. We had 26 FDA-approved drugs for some form of male sexual dysfunction in the United States, but not a single one for women? Not a single one. What do you think? What was I going to do about that? Well, I'll tell you what I was going to do. I was going to summon my curiosity. I was going to figure that out. That didn't make sense at face value, did it? And it certainly didn't make sense considering that we knew from brain scan studies that for women, there could be a biological basis to their lack of interest in sex. We knew it, and yet we weren't paying attention to it. This is what I think. Curious minds ask questions when the rules don't make sense. So I started doing some homework. I spent a year inside of my company with a male sexual health drug just talking to women who were living with this condition, women who were really struggling with their sense of self because of this, struggling in their relationships because of this, and why. Sex is complicated. Women aren't complicated. Sex is complicated. There's a slide in which I love to put up, I don't have it today, in which there is men, and it's a single on-off switch, and then there's women, it looks like the cockpit of an airplane. And I love to put that up and say, thanks everybody, thanks for having me, because we believe so to our core that that's true, but the reality is, we all bring a lot of things into the bedroom with us. We bring how we were raised, religion, in the bedroom. We bring the psychology of how we're doing in the relationship. But I will tell you this, men and women alike bring biology into the bedroom, and yet we were completely ignoring it. So, I made a bold move. I sold off that business in men and took on women. No one thought I'd get it done. No big company had ever gotten it done. But I sat down with the FDA and I said, what's the roadmap? What do I need to do? And I'm very proud of the scientific work we did. We did hard work. We went out and we studied this drug in over 13,000 women. I'll give you just a comparator. The average new drug approved in the United States is approved on about 1,000 patients. We studied 13,000. I'm very proud of that data set. Thank you. Especially in a day and age in which we don't include women in clinical trials to the extent that we should. So I went out and I did all of that work, and here's the plot twist. I met all my endpoints. I did all the work that they laid out for me. It's just science, but they turned me down. That was a bad Friday. Bad. I can remember I just landed, my plane had just touched down, I received the news, and I was thinking, we've met all the endpoints, we did all the work. I land, I get this call, they've turned us down, and I can remember sitting down in the airport, and I think I probably sat for 2 hours, because I did not know what to say to all the people who'd come to work for me. That was the end of the company as I knew it. They completely controlled my fate, and they'd said no. And we didn't have millions of dollars in the bank to go on. So I can remember I went into the company. We all sort of stood around. Everybody looked at me like, what does this mean? I confessed I didn't have the answers. We were going to take the weekend, all of us, to think about it. I'm sure everybody was polishing their resumes. And I took to the bed and maybe cried it out for a little bit. And when I did that, I woke up the next morning and I went back to my inbox. I went back to my inbox because I was privileged enough that women wrote me their stories every day. They knew what I was taking on, and they shared their most personal struggles behind the closed doors of their bedroom with me to cheer me on. And one woman in particular had written, she'd heard the news, thank goodness for her, and she said, I was in your trials. I need to speak with you. So I went to meet with her. And I can remember I walked in the room, and she came walking into this restaurant we were meeting at, and I saw her coming from across the room. Total type A. Women with this condition typically are type A. I could see her coming in, and she sat down next to me, and she, by all appearances, had it all. She'd built her own business. She'd raised 2 beautiful boys. She had a wonderful marriage and adored her husband. But she had this condition. And she said to me, I have succeeded in every aspect of my life other than this. And what I saw was the portrait of a woman. She'd raised her hand 1,000 times, something's wrong, something's changed, help. And she'd been patted on the shoulder and told to relax or take a bubble bath. And I said, can I show you something? And I get in geek mode, open up my MacBook, and I'm starting to show her those brain scan studies I showed you earlier. And what those show is that if you take a woman with this condition, and you take a woman who's happy with the normal ebb and flow of desire, and you put them in an MRI, and you expose them to some sexual cues, their brains light up totally differently. In black and white, we knew it scientifically. So I pop open my MacBook, I'm showing her these brain scans, I'm totally geeking out, and I realize that she's not paying attention to me anymore, and I turn to her and she's crying. And as soon as she's crying, I'm crying. And I thought in that moment, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. She reminded me that the riskiest thing of all is to lose your resolve. I set out for women to have an option. And so I went in on Monday and I told my whole company, we're gonna dispute the FDA. I like to call that the road less traveled. It's not typical to take on the government, but we did. And I did because I had 13,000 women worth of data. 13,000. And the reality is that we just weren't listening. It's really simple. In life, in drugs, but in life, right? We evaluate opportunities as benefit risk. And it feels really objective, benefit risk. But it's actually quite subjective. Because if we don't assign any value to something, then any risk would be too great. And that's entrepreneurship as well, isn't it? Because if you don't take the shot, where are you going to be in 5 years, in 10 years? But we look at that. Think about the benefit to you in taking the shot. So I took them on, and I took them on as well because of that story of the woman. Benefit, I knew, was in the eye of the beholder. We were looking at something with all sorts of cultural feelings about sexuality and female sexuality, and we weren't just listening to women who would write me these letters and say, thank you for letting me know I'm not alone. Benefit is in the eye of the beholder, and thankfully the FDA started to listen. It was that independent thinking, if you will, that started to persuade people. Because don't you have to start asking the question of, but what if the pill had been blue? Because if the pill had been blue, I would have been considered to have met such an important unmet medical need that I would have been fast-tracked through the FDA in just 6 months. Took me 6 years. And by the way, I had 3 times as many patients in clinical studies. That independent thinking came in awfully handy. And what I'll tell you is when you do, stay true to that conviction, and you take that road less traveled, you'll be surprised by those people who join you along it. I had the most incredible women's rights, thank you, women's health and women's rights leaders in DC start to become the surround sound, because I started asking questions, and then they started asking questions. And to the FDA's credit, they listened. They opened their doors to the public. They had the largest ever public meetings in which women came and spoke at the mic, experts came. They finally listened about the benefit and then looked at the scientific data that would characterize, if you will, the risk. And so they assembled in their final play a group of experts who voted overwhelmingly to approve the drug. And on that day of approval, this little company that could, there were 35 of us, became the largest news story in the world. This tiny company in Raleigh, North Carolina, I gotta tell you, nobody knew who we were, Sprout Pharmaceuticals. We were private, and what's so funny is when we disputed the FDA, Nightline showed up. And then all of a sudden, all of my team started going up in the elevators. We're on the 10th floor, and people would look at us and they would say, I know what you do on the 10th floor now. But that little company that could did it. And you know why? We sold it the next day for $1 billion. We did what nobody thought we could do. And we did it because we didn't start out to be a unicorn. We didn't go in and declare our greatness that we were going to create a blockbuster drug. We went in because we wanted women with a medical condition that we have known about since the 1970s to have a medical treatment option. And we did it by day in and day out, putting our head down and doing the hard work that it takes to get there. And then we sold it, and guess what? They didn't launch it. So we had to fight them, and we got it back for nothing, but we kept the $1 billion. But my hard work wasn't done. I had a lesson at the hands of the greats, at the hands of women's rights and health advocates. And you know what? Once you're an entrepreneur, and you guys know this, you never stop working. My work is my passion is my work. I'm not sitting on the beach, except for tomorrow. But that is what this is all about. And so today, I do work in the Pink Ceiling. And the Pink Ceiling is about investing in female-led or focused healthcare opportunities. We invest in them. And you know why I do it? Because this is nonsense. 2% of venture funding goes to female founders. We think that half the population has 2% of the good ideas? Ridiculous. No. So giving access to funds, and very importantly, giving access to mentors, which I think is the unspoken injustice, if you will. It's a lonely club to be a woman who sold a company for $1 billion, and that should not be the case, and I'm gonna change that. So here is my Pinkubator, because why shouldn't there be a Pinkubator for women? Here's an example of some of the companies. We've invested in 11 different companies that do great work. Male founders who are doing great work for women, female founders doing great work. And I'll tell you just really quickly about a couple of them. Leah, you heard about, is the Not Your Mother's pregnancy test. It's the first ever eco-friendly pregnancy test. It's flushable. And here's the thing about the founder, who you can see here on the right, Bethany. This is co-founders Bethany and Anna. But Bethany jumped in an Uber with me and pitched me. She would not let me get out of the car until I had heard her whole story. I loved her from the minute she stepped into the car, although I would have never told her that at the time. She had to win me in coming in, but it's incredible, and I think this is an idea that maybe only a woman would have thought of, right? That it is, why should 80% of our pregnancy tests be plastic? That makes no sense. Why should a woman who's going through infertility have to go into her bathroom every day and be reminded that she's not pregnant again? It's a different kind of conversation around a women's health product. I have Jessica here, who's the founder of Intuitap. Probably found me, geek like me, had gone into all of the funders and asked for money, and she is 5'10", blonde, totally Texan, and young, as you can see. She's laughed out of the room. Nobody's gonna take her seriously, but here's what I know. Jessica is reinventing the spinal tap. And when she sells her company for several $100 million, the next time a 5'10" blonde from Texas walks in the room, the checkbooks are going to open up. And that's important to the work that we're doing. And finally, undercover colors, which is such an incredible and socially needed technology in which you can, with just dipping my finger in a drink and touching a disc, I know in seconds if there's a date rape drug in that drink. That's the kind of work that we want to be doing. So here's the goal, really simply. My goal for the pink ceiling is to create an army of pink owners. My goal, quite simply, is to make women really rich. And this is what will happen when we do that. Women will pay it forward. They will pay it forward to the next women, to their communities. We know it by all of the data, and yet we don't talk about it. Women, of course, need a voice, but what women really need is power, and money is power. Money is power to sit on the side of the table and make decisions about the things that we want to see in this world. That's really so fundamental and important to me, and probably my greatest pride of all in building these companies and everything else is the multiplier effect of ownership. Everyone who's ever come to work for me has skin in the game. They have stock. And when I sold my very first business, Slate, I'll share one last story with you guys. You know, it's a little bittersweet when you sell it because you've been on such a ride together, you're such a family, you know, it's you locked arms against the world, but I knew that we had to sell that business off in order to take the business on for women. And so I thought long and hard, how am I going to tell all of my people? And so I printed Monopoly money that I called Slate Bucks. And I put it in envelopes, and I gave it to everybody in the office, and I mailed it overnight to all of those people in the field. And I said, at noon, we're going to have a meeting. I got on the call, and I said, open your envelope. That's how much money you're putting in the bank today. And what was incredible is that one young woman who worked for me, first generation to ever go to college, she called me hysterical. And she's so incredible. Like, she sends so much emojis in her email. We had to get a new, new server. Like, so much. She's so expressive. And her call came through first. I call her Glow Bug. She calls me up, and she's, can't even speak through the tears. And I'm anticipating, and I say to her, Glow, I know, but this is what we set out to do. And our ride together isn't over. By the way, she works with me still today in our third company together. But she said, no. That money is enough to pay off my parents' mortgage. And then I was crying. The multiplier effect of ownership is so powerful. It's so very powerful. So here's what I look for, really simply, for all of you entrepreneurs in the room. I look for owners with enough curiosity that they're going to challenge the rules that don't make sense, the rule breakers. I look for owners who have so much conviction, resolve in their independent thought, even if it defies conventional wisdom, that they're going to take the risk. And I look at the people who will just put their head down, do the work, and be the moneymaker.